Hi, I'm Nicholas Seminario, founder of Dark Angel Company. This podcast is to share the untold stories of just a few of the many people battling mental illnesses in this world. If you're in need of a little inspiration to keep fighting or to feel less alone in your battle, keep listening and share to spread awareness. This is the Dark Angel Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dark Angel Podcast. It is me and Max again today. I really appreciate all the support that we've been getting lately. Please go comment and give a share and rate 5 stars for the show. It really helps us out. I really appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. So today we have another very interesting topic, and I think you guys are going to like it. And I just want to preface this by saying we're not recommending people go out and try psychedelics or cannabis or whatever to heal their mental health, but just so you guys know that there are things that people are doing and there are ways it could positively or negatively affect your mental health, and I thought it was a pretty interesting and fun topic. So I want to get into first how cannabis affects mental health. People use cannabis for different reasons. Some people like to relieve mental or physical health symptoms. Some people like to use it just to have fun. You know, there's many different reasons why people use it. The first thing I mentioned is called self-medication. So this is kind of where you're going to use something to make yourself feel better in the short term. And in the long term, it can create or make your problems worse or create newer problems. So I'm just going to get into kind of how cannabis works. It goes into your bloodstream when it's smoked, and it will quickly be carried to your brain, and then it sticks to your receptors. And your receptors are nerve endings in your body, which respond to certain changes and stimuli, and this is going to affect your mood and your behavior. When eaten, cannabis will still go into your bloodstream, but it takes longer and it will travel through your stomach and then your liver first. Cannabis contains a lot of different chemicals known as cannabinoids, and these are some examples are like CBD, THC. These are the main active ingredients in the cannabis plant. So without all that boring stuff, let's get into some of the effects and some things or experiences that, you've had with cannabis or anything that your friends, whatever it is.
Yeah, so I will say I have smoked before, and I have regularly at points in my life, specifically when I was living in Florida. And I enjoyed it. It's fun, obviously. It's kind of like drinking for some people. I never liked drinking. This was kind of like my vice. And it's fun to a point, but there were points when I would be smoking too much, and you tell yourself it helps you and it helps you recover and it helps all these things, and people don't realize that the level or the frequency at which you do something really affects how it affects your body. If you're smoking weed once a week, that may actually have a positive effect on you, because it's still kind of a fresh feeling. It's more of a euphoric feeling. You actually feel pretty good. But when I noticed when I was doing it more regularly, say maybe once a day, or even twice a day at points, which really isn't that much compared to what some people that I know do, or smoke it or eat it, whatever, however they choose to ingest it, like you start to feel crappy all the time, like not angry, but on edge. You're constantly stressing about things, and for me personally, it got to a point where like I would feel my heart just like beating really hard for no reason. I'd just be kind of hanging out, and that's when I noticed it had a negative effect on my mental health. And I know some people say that it has a positive effect, and I think it's very individual. Some people don't like it at all. Some people love it, and then there's a huge spectrum in between that, anyone can kind of fall into. And you just have to be smart about it. And I think the same goes with drinking or kind of any other drugs. Is if you're going to do it, you just have to do it in moderation, and you have to be very conscious about how often you're doing it, and pay attention to how you start, like how you feel and how it changes as you do different things.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off that, you have to make sure you're not doing it to a point where it's really negatively affecting your life and really can have a bad impact. I know you said at one point you were doing it almost every day. Did you notice like a lower motivation, less productivity? You did.
Yeah, at points. And like there was maybe, okay, so this is what it was like for me. I'll just be more specific. There were maybe a couple of months where 1 month, they were spread out. Like it's 1 month here, 1 month there, and another month maybe at the end, right before I moved back, where I was doing it more consistently. And it was different each time. There wasn't one thing that was necessarily consistent until it got to the point where I was like, okay, I got to stop for a little bit again. Or even sometimes like months on end. I had to step away from it because it wasn't positively affecting me. And maybe the first month, I was still going to the gym every day. I was still going to work every day. Like I was doing all these things, but you can do more. You know what I mean? Or like you're used to doing other things. You kind of stop doing those other things. You do the bare minimum. That's what I noticed. There were other months or another month where, I wasn't really doing anything. That month I'll talk a little bit more about alcohol too. There were points when I was in Florida where I don't want to say I went off the rails. I didn't really go off the rails, but like just let loose a little bit more.
Yeah, you weren't in your best headspace.
I'm a teenager, whatever. It happens. And then maybe the last month it was more for mental health, you know what I mean? And it was nice the first couple times, but when you start doing something regularly, like it takes away the good euphoric feeling. It's like Christmas every day. It becomes not fun after a certain point, And it's tough. You have to pay attention to yourself. You have to know what's good for you. And I really don't think smoking every day is good for anybody.
Yeah.
Because it really changes who you are.
It does. And even, so there's studies that are done on it. Smoking weed actually gives you that feeling of being a lot more depressed. You're a lot more hungry. You have all these things that are kind of like side effects of it. And you can also then start to hallucinate, right? So then you can get into, examples of psychosis, which is not good. It's very bad for your brain. But that lack of sleep then also leads to depression. And it's kind of this like loop where you're just constantly in this tunnel of can't sleep. Now I'm depressed. Now I need to go smoke weed. It's just this kind of vicious cycle.
And not only that, when you're talking about the appetite, eventually becomes an appetite suppressant too. Like people don't talk about that enough.
It messes your appetite up after, right?
I would lose. There were points where like I would be eating so much food, or at least what felt like so much food, and I'd be losing weight. And when I would stop, my weight without changing a thing would go up 5-10 pounds in healthy weight, not like body fat. You know what I mean? And I would feel better. I'd feel more awake. I'd feel like I had more energy. Like that's another thing too. You don't get out of bed in the morning, especially if you do it right before you go to bed. You wake up with like a weed hangover, so to speak, where you're groggy. You can't really get out of bed. It's tough to kind of like really wake up. I had to do coffee and I'd go outside, I'd take a shower, and then I'd eat breakfast, and then maybe I'd kind of feel awake,
Which is hours after.
Which is an hour or two after you get up, and that's an hour or two every day, and that's not something that is sustainable.
Yeah, and another thing I know too, like there's people I know who will smoke pot all day, and they're kind of just super lazy, they're not go-getters. They don't want to do anything other than just sit in their house and smoke weed. But then I also know people who they're super successful, they're doing their things, but weed isn't like their priority. They're doing it more for a relaxing, say just like a drink on a Friday night, right? If like you get a super successful guy who wants to go grab a drink, whatever. Like I find no problem with it. Like I personally don't smoke weed, but I have no problem with it. I think it's a problem when it's starting to, just like an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic and it's starting to affect your work, it's affecting your family, it's affecting your life, it's a problem.
When it's affecting you when you start to center other things around it. You don't do it around other things.
Exactly.
I have friends who are really, really successful and are really working towards like things that they love and are really passionate about, and they get up and they do it every day, no problem. And they smoke weed all day long every day. And I just can't do that, you know? And maybe it's affecting them, and I don't know.
Yeah.
You know? But from what I see, it doesn't. And that's kind of where you kind of have to just pay attention to yourself, too.
Exactly. Yeah, it's more of a personal thing, like you said. You have to be able to... And, you know, I find it hard to believe that it doesn't affect people if you're doing it every day. And I could be wrong.
Yeah,
you know, I could be completely wrong.
From my experience, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's like... Sometimes, and look, like I said, like there's nothing wrong with having fun or having a good time, but it's like anything. You have to do it in moderation, and you have to be able to still function. Like you said, you can't base your life around it because
it's a drug.
Exactly. Then you have an addiction. Yeah. That's an addiction.
It is. Yeah.
You know, and whether people say, "Oh no, it's not addictive. It's not this."
Every pot smoker will tell you they could stop if they wanted to.
Exactly.
And most of them can't.
No. So, and that's the issue. That's when it becomes the issue. When it's so important to them, it's become obsessive, and that's all they can really think about. Like you said, you're basing your life around it, and that's when it starts to debilitate you and affect other aspects of your life.
Yeah.
So, was there any times where you had any really scary situations while smoking weed? You know, any like scary stories? Not
scary per se, but when I was in Florida, I'd gone to the beach one day to just kind of hang out. This is when I was working in South Carolina. I was going back and forth every week, and I went to the beach right after I got home, and on my way home from the beach, I got pulled over, and I had been smoking at the beach, and weed is a big no-no in Florida.
Wasn't I on the phone with you?
You might have been. You really, because I hung up on somebody.
It was
I think
me.
we were on the phone.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were on the phone. Yeah, dude. I was talking to you when I was walking on the beach, right?
Yes.
We were talking, I got in the car, I drove home, and I was like, oh, yeah.
And then you were like, oh, his lights are on. So get into the whole story. Start from the beginning.
No, so I just happened to be driving down the street. I didn't live far from where I was going to the beach at the time. It was maybe a 5-10 minute drive. And I just was talking on the phone. I'm not thinking about it. I'm like, oh, is there a cop in that car? Because a lot of times they plant cars on the side of the road where I was, and I'd known that. So I was looking in the car. Apparently, I was staring too hard. This guy just turned his lights on and came after me. Not in like a malicious way, you know, but he pulled the old, your taillights out. Like, my taillight's not out. Like, we all know it, you know. My car smelled. I had a spray in my car. I got away fine, luckily, but that was a big moment for me. I was like, okay, I got to stop that.
And did that kind of scare you into doing it a lot less? And
yeah, that was probably the start of me doing it less. I don't think I smoked after that for the rest of the time I was in Florida.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, I wasn't there much longer after that, but maybe another month or two.
That's so
3.
funny. Yeah, I remember that. You were driving home. I was driving home too.
Yeah.
We were both driving, and
the sun was going down. I remember.
Yeah.
Or the sun had just gone down.
Yeah, and you're like,
I gave him some like sob story. I was like, oh, you know, I'm just, I was like, oh, I'm struggling, whatever, just trying to like make it through, whatever. I'm doing fine. Yeah, you know what I mean?
But you're like, oh, Nick, the lights are on. I'm fucked.
yeah. That's how it felt. You know, like my heart fell out of my ass at that moment.
Yeah.
You know?
That was funny. I mean, it wasn't funny, but
Mom,
it was
if
funny.
You're listening, this didn't actually happen.
Exactly. This is just for the podcast.
Yeah,
don't worry.
I made it up. Don't worry.
But so kind of segueing from that, I know you also mentioned alcohol. So you said this was a little bit of an issue also.
Yeah. See, I don't want to say it was an issue. I was never a big drinker. I never really liked it that much. But when I was in Florida, I did drink a little bit more than usual. It's just fun time, you know. And I just stopped briefly playing baseball because I'd torn up my elbow. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I was like, if there's any time to kind of enjoy myself, it's now. You know, I'm in Florida. The bars are awesome, right on the water. Weather's beautiful. And it was just becoming like springtime, you know, so it's like 75, 80 every day. We kind of had built a group of friends that we had met downtown too, or like various areas of the gym, whatever. We'd all go out. We still had our baseball team that was still living there. So we were going out a little bit more, and I wasn't drinking so much, It was more like a weekend thing, for a month or so, maybe like 4 or 5 weeks. And it wasn't that I felt like crap doing it. It was more so that when you're not doing it, you feel twice as bad as you ever normally would. And like the same thing goes for weed or really any drug. Like it's like a huge roller coaster, right? But if you just, like when I'm not now, it's kind of here. But when you're here, you can bring it all up. You know what I mean? Like that, you bring that whole line up compared to just riding a big roller coaster. You have the extreme up and downs, and emotionally and mentally, that's super taxing.
Yeah.
And that's what takes the motivation away.
Yeah.
You know, not like you're also spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
Doing that stuff too. Like if I hadn't spent money on all that stuff, I'd have a lot more money right now. You know, probably spent too much money doing that stuff. But it is what it is. You know.
Yeah, and you know, alcohol is a coping mechanism for a lot of people, which I don't know if it was for you.
I never really liked it that much for it to be.
Yeah.
I have friends though who really have a problem. Like if they drink, they can only absolutely get blacked out, and there's no in between. And those people can't, from what I've noticed, they can't really drink because that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, because then you black out, you don't remember what you do, and that's a guilty feeling too.
Yeah.
You know?
See, like, for me, I'm not somebody who drinks, so, like, I don't really resonate with this.
It's a better way to do things, though.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm just somebody who never excited me, you know, I just, whatever. But it's also something important to look out for in families, too. Like, in my family, you know, my grandparents were big drinkers, you know, they were alcoholics. You know, my dad's dad and my mom's dad, they were both big drinkers.
That whole generation was bigger into drinking and smoking and stuff, though, right?
Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's kind of in you. At least it's in me.
Yeah.
You know,
addiction runs in my family.
Same with mine.
That's why I have to be really careful.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, like, I never really. I mean, I don't know if you guys can tell from hearing me talk or whatever, but I get really obsessed with things. So I get really, really into things.
Yeah.
So it's like I make sure I'm getting into things that will only benefit me and not hurt me, because that stuff, if I were to get into it, I most likely would get obsessed, and then it would cause a lot of problems. So I don't even want to like entertain that.
That feeling that you're talking about where you kind of get obsessed with something, that's the feeling that goes away when you do too much of that stuff.
Okay.
Like you just don't have that focus or that desire to kind of really get into something.
Interesting. So it kind of like just flatlines you almost. Like it's just everything's so bland. Yeah. Interesting. That's a very interesting
and sometimes
look.
It's a good thing on occasion. Say you're going to have a drink, whatever, smoke a joint, whatever. Like sometimes you just need to kind of be whatever, you know, if you're struggling with that.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the positive side of it comes in.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's all negative. But I do think, you know, you continue, but I think that's kind of where where the balance is.
That's exactly where I was going with it, 100%. And also, alcohol is a depressant, which you may know. I don't know if you guys at home know, it's a depressant. So it can disrupt the balance of your neurotransmitters, which is your chemical messengers, right? So it's going to be sending different messages to your brain, and it affects your feelings, your thoughts, your behaviors. But alcohol affects the part of your brain that controls inhibition, you know, so you may feel relaxed, less anxious, and more confident after a drink. But these definitely wear off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And the chemical changes in your brain can then lead to more negative feelings, right? So you could be a lot more angry, a lot more depressed, anxious. No matter what your normal mood is, you can have a lot of these side effects.
Yeah, and so another thing, speaking of like the neurochemical side of it, dopamine, which is like you have a finite amount of dopamine. Dopamine is what drives you. It's what helps you keep your discipline. It's what helps you do things every day. It's your motivation, so to speak. You only have a finite amount, and it has to be recycled. It gets recycled through sleep, mostly, right? And it doesn't get recycled through exercise, but when you expend dopamine through positive behaviors, like some people may be art, other people may be business, other people may be, you know, whatever you're passionate about, that's not like staring at your phones spikes dopamine too. Like that's a drug just the same. are your phones. People don't really realize that, but smoking a joint and spending an hour on TikTok has the same effect on your brain. Not
yeah, I know what
not
you mean.
to a T, but like
Yeah.
the same feeling
Yeah.
where you're just like whatever after.
Interesting.
And you can't really, it's not something that comes back when you want it to,
Okay.
because you kind of have to go through, it's like a cycle. You kind of have to recycle it back to be used again, you know? I don't know the exact science behind it, so if I sound like an idiot, my bad. But I hope I'm
right
getting the
on.
point across.
Yes,
you know
exactly.
what I mean?
And I see, like, I didn't even know that. So you explained it in a perfect way. And do you know how it affects mental health, alcohol? Or no?
No, I'm sure not very well, but
Yeah, exactly. So alcohol problems and mental health are very, very closely related. Research shows that people who drink alcohol are a lot more likely to develop mental health problems. It's also true that people with severe mental illness are more likely to have drinking problems. This may be because they self-medicate, meaning they drink to deal with these difficult feelings or symptoms. And regular heavy drinking is linked to symptoms of depression also, because people with depression who drink alcohol are often, they start to feel better within the first few weeks. Like I said, you're going to start feeling a little more relaxed, a little more confident. And it's likely that alcohol is really causing your depression, right? So if your symptoms of depression continue, you should always speak to a therapist or somebody for help, because it's very, very important. You know, you don't want to be here with these problems if you're struggling. You know, there are lines and places where you can
people in your life who
help.
care about you too.
Yes, definitely.
You know,
And another big thing, it's not recommended to drink when you're on things like antidepressants, right? Alcohol can make depression worse, and it definitely increases some of the side effects of those antidepressants.
Yeah, you shouldn't be. If you're on any medication regularly, you should be very careful about anything you put in your body.
Yeah.
Because it'll all affect you in twofold, threefold, whatever, because you're on consistent medication already.
Exactly.
You know?
And, you know, so that goes for depression. Now, anxiety, you're going to notice, say, if you have anxiety, like I said, in the first few minutes or whatever, the first times you're drinking, you're going to notice the anxiety is going to kind of go away, right? But if you rely on alcohol to then cover your anxiety, you're going to find yourself drinking a lot more, right? And then now this is when it becomes an addiction, and this is when it becomes a problem, right? This can lead to you depending on alcohol, which obviously you never want to do. You don't want to be depending on any substance.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, you're actually going to find out that your hangover is going to make your anxiety a lot worse, right? So
that's when I noticed I would feel like crap the most.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you are somebody who's using alcohol to unwind, think about other ways to kind of relax, things like meditation, yoga, exercise, things, you know, you can do that you're going to enjoy. So you're not kind of depending on something. It's something you're going to do to enjoy.
Just go outside, too.
Exactly.
It's a good thing.
Be in the sun. It's so important.
Yeah. No, it really is, for just health in general. Mental health, physical health, anything.
Exactly.
The sun, being outside, going for a walk. It'll solve 99% of your problems. Not all your problems, but like it's a good place to start.
It does.
You know?
It really
It'll give you a really good feeling.
Yes.
You know? And one thing I forgot to add about weed, it's been linked to a lot of heart disease. Or what was it? Heart disease. It definitely increases your risk for like heart issues.
Really?
And
clogged arteries, all that stuff too, or no?
I don't know necessarily what. I didn't read the full paper, but when I was kind of looking into the effects of like long-term cannabis use, that was one thing I read, that it can really have a negative effect on your heart. And there's been multiple things that have come out since then that like support that.
Very interesting.
So just be careful.
Yeah.
You know, especially nowadays, people aren't as healthy as they used to be. So everyone's at more of a risk for getting sick, you know, chronically.
Yeah, definitely. So this next section, we're going to be talking about psychedelics on mental health. So I actually just saw in another podcast, it was Joe Rogan's podcast, this guy, Ari Shafir. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I don't know if he has his own podcast, but he did a drug called salvia on his podcast. So he took salvia. He was on it for, he took one hit, and the guys he was with they felt it wasn't good enough, so they made him take another hit, and he said this hit was way bigger than the first one and way bigger than he should have taken. So he said he was
Joe
cooked.
Rogan?
No,
Or the
it was
other guy?
Ari Shafir.
Okay.
This guy was cooked. He said he was like, I was done. He winds up being passed out, I believe, for like 10 minutes, right? And now this is when he's tripping. He woke up. He lived an entire life for about 6 months in this trip.
Yeah.
He was an underwater sea creature. He had a girlfriend or a wife, he said. He didn't remember which one. Instead of drinking water, he breathed water. Like, he said he lived an entire life underwater. Like, how crazy is that? He had this feeling like he was there. Like, he said he started making friends. He was a part of their community. He was in his head.
Yeah.
Like, how crazy is that to even think about?
No, it's a scary thing.
It is.
It's
So
really scary, especially if you don't, like, what I've heard, because personally, like, if I was to be in that situation, I don't want to say freak out, but the breathing water thing would definitely, obviously, like, right now I'm not in it, but, like, if I just started, like, all of a sudden, like, in my head I could breathe water, I don't know what I would do.
And he said once he woke up, everything was also dissociated, right? So it took him a few, you know, like you have to think too, like, we all have lives here, right? We all have connections. We all have friends, family, whatever it is. We have connections. We're present. At least we try to be. This guy made those connections in his head with other people. So it's like,
or animals or whatever.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
it's like, it's so crazy to think about because you're making these connections and it feels so real. So it just makes me think too, like it makes, you know, like I said, kind of this dissociation. If everything, you know, almost feels like, is this real? You know, it's a very weird thought to have, you know, because then you could kind of get into this endless loop. Well, maybe we're all just tripping out right now and none of this is real.
I mean, who's to say it's real?
Exactly.
You know
What if
I
we're
mean?
really sea creatures and we took some drugs and now we're humans? Like, you don't know. It's so weird to think about. But surprisingly, psychedelics actually have the best effect on your mental health.
Yeah.
So as to where the other two negatively affect your mental health, for the most part, you know, I don't want to, this is kind of generalizing. This is overall. Overall, psychedelics have the best effect on your mental health. And like we said before, we're not suggesting you guys do any of this stuff.
Yeah, you can't just go out there and like, oh, this is good for me, I'm going to take a bunch of it. Like, that's not how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Like, you have to actually read how it positively affects your mental health and then be very strategic in how you implement it.
Yeah.
It's not just I'm going to go take a bunch of shrooms.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. And, you know, you guys, I hope you guys listened to our episode with Gia. She did mushrooms and it kind of fixed her whole life. She was able to look at her life and have a very different outlook on it. And it's not something she does regularly. She said she's done it a few times, and it was kind of more of just like a healing thing.
Yeah.
And that's what helped, right? So some people it helps. It really helps her mental health. And like I said, it's not for everybody. We're not suggesting or telling you guys to go do anything, but these are just some data points that we found and information that we found, and we're just the vessel of the information.
Yeah.
Psychedelics use was associated with the significant improvement in depressive and anxious symptoms, and it also increases emotional well-being. These improvements increased in magnitude with increasing psychedelic exposure with a ceiling effect. However,
what do you mean a ceiling effect? Like
so
up to a certain point?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And improvements were noted following a single lifetime use. A strong evidence for benefit of one preferred psychedelic agent over another was not observed, but enduring increases in factors related to mystical experience and pro-social perspective, taking associated with enhanced mental health.
Yeah. So I've tried them one time. Oh, well, I don't want to say one time. Multiple times. Small doses. Very small doses. It was all together over all those times. It was in an eighth or whatever when I got it from like a guy I worked with, who used them every day, which blew my mind because I would lose it if I was stuck in that loop of whatever. I don't even know. I never took enough to like hallucinate or do any of the trippy stuff. I only ever took enough to like, I wanted perspective. When I came back from Florida, I was struggling a little bit. And like, I wasn't really sure what was happening. I tried them out, and I was on my dad's balcony, just kind of sitting outside on a lounge chair. And like, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, these things don't work. Whatever. I'm like, I gotta go take more. Like, what's going on? All of a sudden, I just like hyper focused on this guy walking down the street. And I'm like, does he really know what's happening? Like, why am I thinking about this? You know what I mean? Then all of a sudden, I'm like, this is all fucking fake. Like, none of this is real. Why does it matter? Like, why do I care? You know what I mean? And it was the weirdest experience of my life. All I can really say about it is I spent maybe the first half of it calming myself down. Because I was freaking out inside, like, what's the point of life? Why am I here? Like, what the hell? Because this is what I'm thinking in my head. It's just kind of like, I don't know if it exemplifies your thoughts.
Yeah, it brings it all to front.
Yeah, but like, I didn't even know I was thinking this stuff, you know? But I wasn't taking enough to really feel anything. I was just kind of like deep in thought. So I went for a drive, whatever, because that cleared my head in Florida. I figured it'd work here. And I'm sitting here. I'm sitting in the car. I'm waiting at a stoplight. I'm like, I could just go through this right now. Like, what's the point of this? Everything in this world is like, it's just it's like man-made. Who cares? What are they going to do if I go through the light? No one's here. And like, that kind of opened up, that moment in particular, the stoplight moment in my head is kind of what I go back to sometimes, where it like, who cares? Like, it took a huge weight off my shoulders, and it did affect me positively. And I did it a couple times again after that. It wasn't as strong, I didn't take as much as the first time, because I didn't like it, honestly, that much. And I kind of wish I hadn't taken it. Outside of that one moment, I didn't like it at all. But it did affect me positively. And afterwards, I was able to kind of like connect things and think about things from a different perspective. Because I don't know if I'm right on this, but I remember hearing that psychedelics kind of connect different neural pathways that aren't usually connected. So it's almost like you're seeing things from a different point of view. Yeah. Like outside your body almost.
Yeah, exactly.
'Cause it's so fresh to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very interesting. I did not know that. That's very cool.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd ever take them again. Not really my thing, you know?
Yeah.
But it was a cool experience, you know? Yeah. It was something I can kind of go back to. And I think, I'm not going to suggest it to anybody by any means. Like, don't ever take my advice on taking anything. But it did have a positive effect on me. Yeah. And like, it helped clear a lot of like negativity from my life.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And like, just from how you're talking about it, made you kind of see things differently, which I guess was your goal. Yeah. From doing it.
Yeah. Just wanted like some questions answered.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't know what the questions were.
Yeah.
But I guess I figured it out.
Yeah.
You know,
that's interesting. And now, would you say it still affects you today? Like it has.
Yeah. I'm much more level. Yeah. Emotionally, like I don't really. Like, I guess before I used to kind of be like all over the place. Like I would react, something good or bad. I'd go to an emotional extreme, and now like, I just don't see a point in it.
Interesting.
You know, it's like I kind of, maybe it's just enough has happened in my life, or maybe that trip, quote unquote, helped me. I don't really know. You know, I don't want to put my finger on it because I don't know for sure, but it has affected me to a point where I'm not so emotional about things.
Yeah. Very cool.
It was a weird experience.
And when did you do them? Was it recently?
What is it, May? $9 months ago.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was right after I got home.
Yeah. I feel like I remember it, but you didn't really talk much about it.
No. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I didn't like it at all. I had like the strongest panic attack of my life.
Really?
Yeah, for no reason too. That was the moment I was like, what's the point of life? I had such a heavy weight on my chest when that happened. I thought I was gonna die.
Get
dude.
into that. I kind of want to hear it. Like,
I don't even remember it. That's the problem.
Really?
Like I'm trying to think about what happened. I don't even know.
So what? Like, you got home, right? You had these bags of mushrooms.
It was very few. It was like this much. It was like a thing of mushrooms like this big, maybe the size of my finger thick.
Oh, really?
And then there was another one in the bag. Yeah. It was like a little eighth drug bag thingy.
So,
Yeah.
so
weird.
you come home, you have a bag of a mushroom.
No, it was at like 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, like I called off work. I wasn't feeling good. Like mentally, I was just not having it that day.
So you woke up, you're like, all right, I'm doing
Screw
mushrooms
this. Yeah.
today.
I was like, I'm gonna try it today. I'm calling off work. I threw, I
Yeah.
lifted, and then I was
Okay.
like, screw this. I'm not going to work today.
So now, you opening this bag, right? What, you just eat it?
No, I put it in a smoothie because apparently it tastes like shit.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you put it in a smoothie. So now when you're blending this mushroom, like, what's going through your head?
Not much.
No.
I wasn't really thinking about it.
No.
I started playing video games. I
Okay.
drank the smoothie, and I was like, I'm gonna go sit outside. Probably enjoy it better outside rather than playing like MLB or something like
Yeah.
that. I went to sit outside, and like I started having a panic attack, so I had to go lay down in bed. I just like curled up under the covers. I was like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long did that last? Like, what was that
So
like?
fully
you're
like
trying, like, because
Well,
me,
'cause-
I've never done that, right? So
Yeah,
what is that even like?
what do you mean like what? What
Like that
particular-
whole experience. Like, take us from the beginning.
It lasted for me. I didn't take that much. It lasted from maybe 10 or 11 until like 4 or 5.
Wow.
Like it wore off
Yeah, yeah.
pretty quickly. Like it got weaker
Okay.
maybe after the first 2 or 3 hours for
But-
sure. But I didn't feel normal until after. And then I tried them again one time way too late in the day. I had a panic attack bad and just slept it off.
And what are those? Okay, so like, is it
And
the
not
same?
in a panic attack in the sense of like, oh my God, my life's over.
Yeah.
Just like for no reason, my heart was beating fast. I like couldn't fully catch my breath.
Interesting.
And I just had to lay down.
So now, when you were high smoking weed or high on shrooms, is it that same feeling,
No,
or it's very
It's
different?
not a high on shrooms.
Oh,
It's not a high at all.
Oh, so
It's
what
a-
is it?
I don't even know.
A trip?
Yeah, like I don't even know.
It's probably considered being high, but
a trip, yeah.
right,
It's
yeah.
More of a,
So,
it's
but what
considered
is
me a
it?
trip.
So, what is that feeling? Like, what does it feel like? Right? Because
Nothing.
really,
It literally feels like nothing. It made me hate weed.
Oh,
I will
really?
Say, yeah. I was like, weed makes me. In that moment, I was like, weed really does make me feel like shit. Now that I'm thinking about it,
okay,
you know, that was one thing I kind of like. I don't want to say I had a question about it. Like I knew it didn't make me feel great, but like that definitely like solidified it for me.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So, as Max was saying, he luckily had a very positive experience with it for the most part.
Yeah.
But
50-50.
there are cases where there are negative outcomes. So for people where, you are really depressed or really anxious, or some people who have suicidal thoughts, sometimes this can kind of exaggerate these emotions, and it could kind of bring it, like you said, to forefront before,
Yeah.
and it can sometimes make things worse depending on the person.
Yeah.
So no matter what you're doing, just make sure you're being safe. Make sure, you have somebody there with you if you're doing
Tell
these
someone
things.
you're doing it.
Yeah, because you
know.
don't want anything to happen. So,
Yeah.
and look, nobody's a professional. So it's like, you really need to be careful what you're putting in your body.
Yeah.
You got to make sure you're getting something legit. Like, you don't know what you're getting, so it's like,
Yeah.
you have to be careful. You have to be very careful and make sure you're smart about, these
Yeah.
decisions.
And one thing I'd say about it too, one thing I did realize, I remember now that I'm thinking about it so much. One thing that really popped up in my head when I was thinking about like what the hell is the point of all this? Like the game or life is all about the people in it. Like that was one thing that became like really apparent to me. Is like everything at the end of the day, like if you're by yourself and you have all the material possessions in the world, or you know what I mean, like by yourself doing whatever, it doesn't feel the same as if you're in a group of people and you're doing half that much.
Yeah.
Like nothing beats those feelings of like playing sports with your friends after school. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where my mind went. And that's also, that particular moment as well had a huge impact. Because I made more of a point to like, in the past I'd kind of distance myself from people if I didn't feel well, physically or mentally. And now I've realized like when I'm around people, I just need to get out of my own head.
I think you've done a great job of that, because I've noticed that. I've noticed a big difference in, your whole behavior. Not that I'm like psychoanalyzing
but you notice things. Yeah. You notice things about people you spend time with.
Yeah. So, and I think you're doing a very good job of that, and it's
Appreciate
definitely a positive thing for you. So, just so you guys know, I'm not going to encourage or discourage you guys from doing anything.
Please don't do it. It's not worth it.
Just, like I said, make sure you're smart about things. Make sure you're doing things in moderation. And make sure, most importantly, you're doing things that aren't going to negatively affect your mental health. Thank you guys so much for listening, and don't forget to check out Dark Angel Company on Instagram at Dark Angel Co. and online at darkangelco.com. If you're interested in supporting and spreading awareness towards bringing light to a dark topic together, then tune in next time.